In this video, we will talk about how to conduct observation in qualitative research. We cannot cover everything related to conducting observation, but we'll look at a couple of things that can be useful to know before starting reading the course literature on observation. First of all, let's talk a little bit about sampling. We've had another video on sampling, but I would like to mention a couple of things related to sampling in observation studies. Because in a way, when you do observation, you sample at different levels. There's a lot of sampling decisions to be made. First of all, you have to sample or select the social setting where you will conduct observation. And this is usually done as you design the project and formulate research question. And by social setting, I mean where you will observe in terms of, are you observing in a church, a shelter for homeless people, a meeting in a youth club, in a refugee center, etc., etc. What kind of social setting will you observe? But you also have to select the specific observation site. Which specific church will you observe? Which specific shelter for homeless people? Which specific youth club or refugee center will you conduct your observation? Will you do in one or several of these specific places? And the selection of social setting and observation site are usually done as you design the project. These things have to be in place before you actually start observing. But then there's some other sampling issues that you can make some plans beforehand, but you might need to adjust them as you learn more about the setting and the place where you're doing your observation. What about time frame? This has to do with when you will observe. Both time of the year. Some certain activities will only happen in March or February. Other activities happens in the fall. So when during the year you observe. That also has to do, of course, with when it's possible for you to do observations. You might need to do some research before selecting a specific observation site to know that it will be possible to observe what you are planning to observe during the time period you have available. But also the time of the day, morning, afternoon, weekday, weekends, when would be a good time for you to do your observation. You might need to go into the field, start doing observation, learn more before you know what would be good time frames to conduct your observation. Then you need to decide what kind of activities will I observe. And of course you can observe also the physical setting. But if you want to observe specific activities where people interact and do something, you might not know, even if you're observing in a church or in a youth club or in a refugee center or a shelter for homeless people, you might not know beforehand exactly what kind of activities you will observe. You might have some ideas and you might need to start observing, writing down your observations, thinking before you know more specifically what you want to focus on. And the same goes with people, who you will observe. Are you observing the volunteers in a shelter for homeless people? Are you observing the homeless people? Are you observing people working there? You might have some ideas before you start observing, but those might also develop as you learn more about the place and the activities going on there. In addition to sampling issues, you need to think about access. How will you get access to the place and the people you want to observe? And access is, we can make a distinction between formal access and informal access. By formal access, I mean that you might need a permission by someone. It could be the leader of an organization, it could be a headmaster in a school, to actually conduct observation. But in addition, you need more informal access. You need to be accepted by people in the setting where you are doing your observation. You can have the formal permission in place, but the people do not accept you, or they don't want your presence there, or they feel like you're disturbing, or you shouldn't be there. So you need to negotiate access to both the research setting and to specific individuals. And there's several ways that you can negotiate access to the research setting, whether this is a church or a shelter or a youth club or somewhere else, something else. You can use friends, colleagues, or existing contacts you already have. You can try to get at least one person who's on the inside, who can work as your kind of supporter or sponsor within the group that you're doing research on. Someone within the research setting who will vouch for you and the value of your research. And you can use gatekeepers, people who are in some kind of position where they can grant you access. It could be people from the management, senior executives, headmaster in a school, leader of an organization, who can open up the door for you to do observation where you want to do observation. And both gatekeepers and key people in the research setting that vouch for you and your research can become key informants in your research that can help you get access to the research setting, but also inform you about events, people you should talk to, things you should know about. But you should also be aware that by using these key people to access and to learn more about the research setting, you might also risk seeing the world through the eyes of these key informants rather than through the eyes of other members of a group or other people who are present in this setting. And you should be aware of how other people might view you if you are seen as closely associated with a gatekeeper or someone with a key position within the research setting. You also need then to negotiate access to individuals, because people might be suspicious about you and your motives. They might see you as an instrument of the top management. They might worry that what they say or do may be communicated to others. So you have to build trust. You have to be clear and honest about what you are doing. You have to allow sufficient time to build trust. And you have to create some kind of role and identity for yourself within the setting. Sometimes presenting yourself as a student is a good way of building trust. Sometimes that doesn't work because people will mistrust you, or they will think that you have the power to do something that you do not have. But you also have to think about what kind of activities should you engage in. We'll talk more about different observation roles in a minute. How do you dress and behave? How will your age, gender, class, religion, political beliefs, etc., influence how people view you? Again, pointing forward to the video on positionality. And negotiating access to individuals might also involve passing so-called tests of confidence, where participants might tell you a lie or tell you something, confide a secret in you to test if you can be trusted. Again, really depending on what kind of social setting you are doing observation in, how long you will stay there, and what kind of people you are observing. Negotiating access can be easy or difficult. When we talk about observation, it's common to distinguish between different observation roles. And the different observation roles, then the difference goes whether you are mainly observing or mainly participating in the activities going on in the research setting. You can be a complete participant on one side. That means that you try to become a full member of the group that you study, participate in all activities of the group, and that you either hide or put aside your identity as a researcher, what is sometimes referred to as going native in social anthropology, where traditionally researchers did research on native tribes or communities in other parts of the world. So going native is about trying to become one of the people you are studying. On the complete opposite side of this continuum, you will find the complete observer, where the researcher does not participate in any activities, only observes. Sometimes hidden, but it could also be that you're communicating and that people are aware of that you're observing, but you're only observing, almost like sitting on a chair in a corner, of a classroom, not participating in any activities, just observing, or observing in public places, sitting on a bench with a piece of paper and a note and a pen and making notes. In between these two points, we find two types of observation roles that are maybe the most common ones in qualitative observation. That is participant as observer and observer as participant. Participant as observer means that you're mainly a participant, but you're not a hidden participant. You're participating in the activities, but you're also observing. So you try to develop relationship with people, you participate in group activities, everyone knows that you're a researcher, and you observe as you're also participating. This could be that you work as a volunteer in a shelter for homeless people or an organization providing help to a certain group of people, and you're participating in the normal activities that a volunteer in this organization would participate in. The last role is observer as participant, when you're mainly observing, usually for short periods of time or just once, and you do not try to form deep relationships or engage more deeply with people in the group. You might participate in a couple of activities a little bit, but your main identity is as an observer. And that you could, for instance, sit in on a meeting in an organization, but you're not taking active part in the meeting. And these roles are roles that you can plan to take on when you're observing. You might also plan to switch between different roles depending on the situation. And you might find that even if you plan to take on one role, to plan to participate a lot, maybe the people you meet as you observe will also place you or ascribe a role to you that they might not allow you to participate as much as you wanted to. Or they might try to make you participate more that you plan to, because you plan to be more of an observer and they place you in a role of more of a participant. So there's something here, there's a dynamic here between you and the people in the research setting. But these concepts can be useful in order to think through your role in the field as you are doing observation.